Good morning. I know I said yesterday that I would begin learning perhaps today Hemshech Ayin Beis, but I decided because I spoke with my office, we haven't fully announced it, and I didn't want to, since many people may want to join from the beginning, I want people to feel like they're starting the journey. So I'll wait another few days before we make all the announcements so people can know this and this day we're going to start. So we'll take another day or two. Talk Chassidus, obviously, but actually starting Samach Vav, I want to make sure that everybody who wants to participate can start. They don't feel like they came even one class late. So I hope you understand. I will just make a little more preparations for that. So what I thought I would talk about, unless somebody has any specific question, was something related to this week's Parsha, which is a very fundamental chapter in the Torah, and talk about it from the perspective of Chassidus. I thought of considered maybe learning a mimer, but that will take more than one day. So let me say the following. This Parsha is the third chapter in Book of Bereshis. It is the story of Avram Avinu, essentially. After we learned the story of creation, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, and their dramas and the generations that came afterwards, which ultimately led to the corruption of the world, and that in turn led into the flood that we read about in Parsha Noach this past Shabbos. Flood and the cleansing of the world and a rebuilding of a new world. And then concluding with the Der HaFlaga, the Der that built the Tower of Babel, challenged God confusing their languages and thus disrupting their plans. So that leads us, end of the chapter, to the birth of Avram, but the real story of Avram Avinu begins in this week's chapter, which is interesting because by Lech Lecha, Avram was already 75 years old. So just a few verses, right, the end of Noach, really cover 75 years. We don't know much about it from the written Torah. We know from Medrash, and for the Gemara, we know from Torah Shabbat Peh, we know more details. So Avram was already on a long journey before Lech Lecha, which was his ultimate journey. He was seeking God. In a corrupt world, if you think of the context, the chronology of events, in a corrupt world, not as corrupt as it was before the flood, but it still was corrupt, meaning a world that was focused on self-interest. That's the whole essence of the Tower of Babel. They built the tower, Las Islam Shem, Nasilanu Shem, the Pasuk says. We'll make a name for ourselves. In other words, it was about glory, coveted honor, fame, pride, vanity. Essentially, all the forces that are antithetical to godliness. So Avram is born into such a world, with Nimrod being the king that ruled in that part of the world, Mesopotamia, which is today modern day Iraq, essentially the countries east of Israel, Iraq, Syria. And he epitomized the self, which frankly remained in effect till this day. You still have leaders that emulate that model. Things have gotten better because we also have republics that are not ruled by a monarch. They're ruled by a democracy. But nevertheless, then that was what was dominating. And Avram is born into this world. And his father is actually a manufacturer of what? Of idols. He's an idol manufacturer. That's where he made his money. Now, if you study the Rambam, the beginning of the laws of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry, you see in a fascinating way, he describes how did a world start worshiping stones, trees, basically all the type forms of worship that humans have devised. The Rambam explains the evolution of the process. And it's very relevant to this discussion. So let me briefly sum that up. He says in the beginning, everyone was aware of one God, that God created the universe. As Adam and Chava were aware. Yes, they sinned and they did their own thing and they deviated from God's plan, but they were aware that there was a creator, whether it was through logic, whether it was through revelation. But it was a very clear picture that the existence didn't create itself. But this God was invisible, meaning it was not of the same type of existence like we are. And people want to have something they can relate to. So what they did was they attributed and they looked at God's world and saw the sun and the moon and the stars, which definitely evoke awe. You see just the awesomeness of outer space. Until this very day, we spend billions or trillions of dollars to understand what's out there. And they said, these are God's creations that he created so we can relate to him. So they began to attribute divine powers to God's creations, to God's instruments, the stars. That's why it's called Evdei Kechavim Umazolis. They served stars and mazolis and the constellations of the stars, and not to replace God, but to make God more accessible. But that is, of course, the first mistake. Why? Because God created us in the divine image, not that we create God in the human image. As soon as you start tampering with God's essential personality, so to speak, and try to make it more relevant and tailored on our terms, you immediately are compromising the very essence of a God that's completely beyond us. Now, that doesn't mean that the divine energy doesn't manifest what we call a Chassidic mamala kalalman in a way that is tailored, but it's still godliness. That is God. When you say Elokim, creating nature, is the godliness within nature. But it's not trying to say, okay, I will speak and pray to the stars because I can relate to them because they are God's so-called instruments or God's fingers or God's handiwork. But it didn't stop there. The stars are also quite distant from us. So the next step, as the Rambam says, people began to build or identify objects on Earth that corresponded to those stars. A tree, a stone, a particular area, and they started seeing those places as holy, sacred places. So now it's coming closer to Earth. And then, of course, there's always the temptation to commercialize. So there are others that saw an opportunity, and they began to become priests. If you want to enter this and this area on Earth that represents and corresponds with these and these the stars, which are all part of God's so-called instruments, you need me as an intermediary. And thus was born paganism. Basically, a form of religion, if you wish, but it was not about God any longer. It was replaced by all these intermediaries. And instead of seeing them as simply what the expression of Chassidus, garzim biyad ha'chetzev, like an axe in the hand of the axeman, they became an end in themselves. And that is the evolution, as the Rambam elaborates upon, of the evolution of how we began the concept of self-worship, or the worship of objects, or you can call it an egel hazav, idol worship. Why would anyone attribute to a piece of clay or an object made out of gold or silver divine powers? It didn't begin with that. It began that God is God, but they're the stars, and then there's the objects on earth that, so to speak, are channeling all of that, and then that becomes an end in itself. So Avodah Zarah is not some type of nonsense that someone just came up with and said, you know what, I'm going to worship a little statue that looks like a person or looks like an animal or whatever it may be. And this became the obsession of the time. Today, it may take the form of money. It may take the form of technology. It may take the form of your iPhone. It's a worship, an addiction to an object that controls your life, when the only thing that can control your life is God. And as soon as you replace that, that's where all the problems begin, because you're ultimately replacing God with something that is mortal, that's something that is not godly. And as soon as it's not godly, it's going to be the opposite. The lack of bittul. The whole idea was the bittul. So Avram Avinu was born into this environment, and the Rambam continues. He says, and then came the Eisen HaGadol, he calls him, this great power, this great entity called Avram Avinu. He's born into a world like this, and he realizes early on, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. It cannot be that these idols, and as I said, his father was a manufacturer of them. You need a God, he had it for you. Whatever it was essentially the fad of the day, the drug of the day, if you wish. And it was indeed considered a drug. The Gemara says that Avodah Zarah was a taiva. It was a desire. Today, that desire was killed. In the Talmud, it talks about how the desire for Avodah Zarah. But think of the desire of sexuality. It was equated with that. Gilui Arayis, Avodah Zarah. These were the desires and the temptations of the time. So Avram becomes quite aware there's something wrong. This is not it. And through a process of elimination, and there are different opinions, and the Rebbe explains it's not opinions, it's stages, where Avram is hikir es beire, when he begins to recognize that there's something beyond us that put all this in place. Some place it says he was 3 years old, some say it says 20 years old, 30 years old, 36 years old, 7. There's different opinions. The Rebbe explains that there are really stages of this awareness. But he realized that this cannot be it. So so he goes out to search. I mean, you know the famous story that one day he went into, I guess, a garage where his father stored his idols. I don't know if there were garages in those days, but the equivalent of a warehouse. And he went ahead and shattered and broke these idols. His father came and saw what he did. He said, what's going on here? What are you doing? This is my parnasa. This is my livelihood. So Avram said, what are these? He said, these are idols. He says, they did it to each other. They got jealous. And one idol hit the other. And his father, of course, started laughing, understood that that's nonsense. The idols don't have any such power. Which essentially was telling his father, what are you talking about? I mean, it's like it's a fabrication. Bottom line is, he goes out seeking. Where do you search? You go to nature. You go into the meadows, into the fields. You look up to heaven. And Avram Avinu is looking for reality. What is real? He understood the physical reality that we lived in is definitely real, but what's behind the scenes? Who put it here? Why is it here? And so on. And interestingly, even though I'm sure he had a special soul, but it was really his search and his initiative and curiosity, which is exactly how God planned it. He didn't want to come and reveal himself. He wanted human beings, through their efforts and through their search, to seek out God. And that's what Avram Avinu does. First he thinks maybe it's the moon, the sun, the stars, they seem so all powerful, but then he realizes they're all an extension of this material world. They're just larger, more distant, but they're still part of this physical world. Just to paraphrase it in the words I like to put it, what he came to realize ultimately was that his search, he's looking for something that's similar to him. Like, who put me here? I know my father and mother gave birth to me, but who created human beings? He was looking for something he could identify. And he came to realize that there's a mistake in that whole attitude. Because the part of reality, the part of the whole, cannot define the whole, the entirety. The whole defines the part. So he realized that my very search was, I'm looking for something that put me here, something that is bigger than I am. And came to realize that no, this God is not bound by the limitations and the parameters of our senses, of our sight, our sound, taste, touch, and smell, and even of our intelligence. It's a reality that's of a different sort altogether. So it's not going to look like a sun or a moon or like anything that we can see. It's a reality that's beyond us. And you have to actually do the exact opposite. Instead of seeking it, you have to shut down and suspend your senses and all your tools and all your perspectives. Be silent, and that reality will then emerge because it's within and beyond everything. That's what he came to realize, that God is something that is completely of a different nature. Basically, he discovered the concept of bittul, which was the exact opposite of paganism, of self-worship. It's not about me. It's not about something on my terms. So it's like when you close your eyes and your ears and you taste, touch, and smell, then you begin to realize there's some deeper consciousness, some higher consciousness. Now, again, everything I'm saying is based on what we read, based on what we've learned in the Torah Shebiksav, in the written Torah, in the oral Torah, and of course, based on Chassidic explains it all. So as he began to come to that recognition, then of course God begins to emerge. It's like the Chabad Rebbe was once asked, where is God? He said, wherever you let him in. In other words, he's everywhere. He's within everything. But you have to let him in. Meaning you have to be aware of it, because he could be there and you could not be aware. What we call, what the Arizal would later call, the tzimtzum arishin, the tzimtzum that conceals the divine presence. So Avram in his own way came to this realization. And then at age 75, God is ready and Avram is ready for their first encounter. And that's when Hashem says to him, Vayemer Hashem el Avram, he says to him, Lech lecha ma'artzecha me'latecha me'beis avicha. Leave, go on to you, leave your land, your birthplace, and the home of your parents, and go el Eretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. So here's a very obvious question. You may have heard it from me, I've talked about it many times. When you give someone directions, the way you do it is you don't have to elaborate on their point of departure. They know where they are. You need to tell them where to go, to what east, west, north, south, what country, what city, what street address, or whatever streets were defined in those days. And here God does the exact opposite. When it comes to the point of departure, he elaborates. Which frankly for Avram was all the same thing. His land, his birthplace, and the home of his parents were all in Ur-Kasdim, where he lived. When it comes to the destination, God says just vaguely, Ela Eretz Asher Reka, to the land that I will show you. But where is this land? What land are you talking about? So how do you explain that? And the bigger question, of course, is the whole verse. Why do we even need to know this? You want to talk about Avram traveling to Israel and God making a covenant with him and all the story that continues in the ensuing chapter, Lech Lecha? Fine. Why do we need to know this Lech Lecha piece? Why is it so important? It's like the first commandment to the first, what would be considered the first Jew, at least conceptually or ideologically. And so the answer is because Hashem wasn't just giving him directions. He was actually telling him how to continue or begin a new level of his journey. Now that you've discovered that I exist and that I, God, is the force behind everything, and you're ready to commit your life to it, now God is telling him instructions. How do you do that? How do you get out of your own way, your own ego, and your own subjectivity that limits your perspective and embrace the true reality of God and of yourself, of your soul? That's what God was talking to him about. In essence, it's really God is speaking to each one of us, because all of us have exactly the same challenge. We live in a corrupt world, a world that worships itself. Individuals worship their power, their individuality, their boundaries, driven by greed, by vanity, by honor, by glory. There's a lot of nobility as well, but we live in a world that is a hostile world when it comes to embracing a higher reality. So God is saying this is how you travel. This is how you journey. And the focus is not where you're ending up. your destination, the focus is where you are. You need to free yourself of the bonds and the forces that inhibit and block us, because we can have very good intentions. We make good resolutions. We could be motivated. But then your past haunts your future. It's like a person who says, okay, I'm going to turn a new page in my life, a new leaf, turn a new page. But the past is still there. The things you've done, your childhood, past experiences, we're all prejudiced by that. So Hashem says to Avram, there are three forms of subjectivity that you need to free yourself from, that you need to leave. So this wasn't just a physical journey from modern day southeastern Iraq to the land of Canaan that would become Israel, but it's a spiritual and cosmic journey. And what is Artzecha, Melatcha, Beis Avicha? These are three forms of subjectivity that all of us are affected by, including Avram. One is your natural and inherent self-interest. We call self-love, avos atzmei. We're prejudiced about ourselves. We're biased. We have blind spots. We minimize things. So that's one form that blocks us from really seeing the truth. And for that, to counter that, you need to have advice from others. You need to counsel, a selech harav. You need a mashpia, a mentor, to help make sure you're honest. The second form of subjectivity is familial and parental pressures. We grow up as impressionable children. So our parents, their attitudes, for good or for bad, shape us. And that's yet another trap. Because when you grow, you want to become an independent individual, but you're very much affected by how your father and mother treated you, treated each other, treated others, which affects us all. With many things we do as a result of our parents' expectations, demands, personalities, and so on. And the third form of subjectivity is the society in which we live. Artzecha, the cultural pressures, peer pressure. You want to fit in. The Shulchan Aruch opens up, Al yevish mipnei hamaligim. Don't be embarrassed by those that will mock you, because we want to fit in, conformity. We don't want to stand out. We don't like feeling something outside. That has tremendous effect on us. Today, that effect is compounded many times over with the media, with social media, with the standards out there that are constantly pressuring us, whether it's marketing or advertising or people trying to hawk and sell us whatever they're trying to sell us. Not to say it's all bad, but it has a deep impact on us. We see things. We see what people are selling or what people are marketing, and it shapes. You start asking yourself. Someone asks you, "Who are you?" It's very hard to answer that question. Who are you, independent of these three forces of your own subjectivity, your parental attitudes, and social pressure? Very hard to answer that. Could very well be that a lot of the things we do is not based on our own independent volition, based on our soul, based on what God wants of us, but it's based on what others have defined they need or expect. How many things that we do to please someone else. We don't want to be confrontational. We want to fit in. We want to make everybody happy. So it's a very profound psychological journey, and that's what Hashem is saying to him. These are the things you're going to have to grapple with, that you're going to have to leave behind. And then, what then happens? I don't have to tell you where you're going to end up, the destination. It'll be Ela Eretz, and the Alter Rebbe has a beautiful interpretation. Ela Eretz asher ereka in Torah lech lecha. Doesn't mean the land that I will show you, because that's the meaning. The simple meaning is, go to the land and I'll show you which land. Ela Eretz asher ereka, to the place where I will show you who you are. Ereka goes on Avram, on the person, not on the land. Go and you'll find out who you really are. Because once you free yourself, to some extent, of those outside influences, then what remains, you start discovering who you really are. What's your voice say? What is your destiny? What's your mission in life? Your personal mission. So in those few words, simple short words in the beginning of Lech Lecha, you have a whole formula for how to find your mission in life, to find your voice and build the courage to pursue it. And recognizing what are the forces that are holding you back. In essence, if you wish, every form of healthy therapy, I say healthy because there's a lot of therapies that are not so healthy or don't work. Every form of therapy is really doing that. I use this often. I tell people, that's what you're doing. Someone comes to a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor or a coach, whatever you want to call it, or a social worker. So essentially, you're grappling with your own fears, inhibitions, insecurities, which may come from past experiences, traumas, loss, suffering, whatever it may be, parental experiences, all these things, and you're trying to free yourself of that. You're trying to have a Lech Lecha experience in order to be able to live a more peaceful life. You don't want those past experiences to affect your existing relationships and encounters and life experiences. So essentially, that's what Lech Lecha is. That's why it's so vital as Avram begins his ultimate journey after everything that happened before that, is to first free himself from those tentacles to some extent, as much as is possible, and then he will emerge. And that's what happens. So Avram's journey to Israel, which would ultimately become Eretz Yisrael, was a journey to himself, to his real essence. And Eretz Yisrael is a reflective in space, on earth, of the real essence of what a neshama is, at least the neshama of a Jew. Now, at that point, there was no real thing called a Jew and a non-Jew, because that was determined by Matan Torah. When there was official conversion of all, the Yidden became converts, and therefore Yidden. But the ideological concept of embracing God versus paganism was absolutely happening. That's exactly what Avram Avinu was a pioneer of, recognizing that. So the continuing parsha continues, obviously, that Avram, of course, listened to this voice of God that told him Lech Lecha, and there you have a human being that became the father of all nations ultimately, Av HaMoyin Goyim, as his name is changed from Avram to Avram, and he becomes what the world calls the father of monotheism. The truth is, he's the one that came and brought back the original oneness of the divine in existence, and recognizing that all of us are created by God and created with a mission. And our life should be driven not by self-interest or by God's created in our image, but rather by what God wants of us. And that was his commitment. And he built a family in that spirit, which is why Avram is Echad Haya Avram, the unique and singular individual Avram. No one like him, because he was the first, the one that broke through, which you can imagine how difficult it was, because he had nowhere to go to. It's not like there was a shul somewhere, or there was a Rebbe, or someone that he can go to. Yes, there was the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever, and there was some individuals and sages that he probably learned from, or definitely learned from, but it wasn't like there was a community, and there was no literature. He had to literally discover it on his own. But there was a God, and the God was within him, and the neshama was there, and Avram was Avram. So it's a fascinating study how this man came to discover all that he discovered, but it did change the world, basically, because in turn he built a family, and a family that continued building a family. And you and I, right here, in the year 2025, and the year Tavshin Pei Vav, almost 4,000 years from the time Avram walked this earth, around 3,800 years to be exact. Avram was born in 1948 from creation. So count 1948, now we're in 5786. So we're talking about almost 4,000 years that he built a family, and each of us are the children and grandchildren in a direct chain all the way back to that. That's why we say every day, many times, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. We're talking about the God of Avram, the God of Yitzchak, God of Yaakov, meaning the God that Avram discovered and then his children and grandchildren discovered and continued to discover and built a relationship with. And that's really the story of who we are. How many people can talk about ancestors that literally in an unbroken chain, we know where they walked, what they said, where they traveled, their challenges, their trials and tribulations. I remember the first time I went to Israel in 1971. I was 14. And I had learned the Chumash, of course, all my years, my whole school years, Cheder years, about Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, about the Chevron, Yerushalayim, Beis Lechem. And then when I visited these places, it was so emotional. And I'm not the only one that's had this experience, because I was literally walking on the earth that I grew up with. But I grew up in the books. It was in the book. It was in the Torah. And here, I remember going to Hebron and seeing the Moras HaMachpelah. And you read in the Parsha about how Avram Avinu bought this place for his wife, Sarah, thousands of years ago. And here it is. And the same with so many other events that we learn about in Chumash. So the places when you walk Israel, you feel, where was Avram Avinu walking when Hashem said in this week's Parsha, walk the breadth of this land, from the east to the west, the north and the south. This is the land I will give you. And you could feel sometimes where you're walking, maybe Avram Avinu walked here, exactly on that ground. So it was a very powerful experience. In New York, where I live and grew up, you don't feel that. I don't know who walked here 4,000 years ago. I don't know if anybody was here 4,000 years ago. But bottom line is, it's just a powerful way of understanding that what we're reading now in the Torah is actually the story of our lives. And the message is exactly the same. Lech Lecha is as relevant today as it was then, and can transform your life when you're able to go on this type of journey. So this is a summation a bit of quite a few Maimorim on this topic, Lech Lecha, some of the Sichos of the Rebbe. In Samach Vav, actually, there's two Maimorim Lech Lecha, as we'll see. One in Tafrei Samach Vav, and one, I think, in Tafrei Samach, Lech Lecha, the 8th Maimer in Samach Vav, and I think the second one is Samach Zayin, the next year, Lech Lecha, the 47th Maimer. So some of it is taken from the themes that are discussed there, but it comes away, it offers us a blueprint of how we travel and what real travel is and what real growth is. So that is my little piece. The reason I'm saying this, if you came late to the class, is we were going to begin, but I want to give people enough time to announce. We're going to announce it through WhatsApp and through our emails and through our maybe a press release. I'll put it up on the websites, so people can have the opportunity. They want to begin talk about the journey of Samach Vav. Just wanted to give people some ample time to do that. That's why I've been so I decided I'll wait a day or two and then we'll start. But I'll stop here for any questions or comments, and I'm happy to talk about anything. So see this as an open session where you can bring any question you like on the table. A type of My Life Chassidus Supply, customized to this small group.
I think you should broadcast this particular what you just said about the importance of this parsha and what its relevance to our psychological. I know it's been said, but I think you said it very eloquently just now. My only question, or at least something that I grapple with a little bit, is, and the role of the angels, and how that kind of, in a sense, how do you sort of put that up against, the idea? I mean, I know the sun and the moon, they're, that's nature, but even the angels are sometimes referred to, as, a higher, somehow, being not on the level with Hashem, but,
Well, you know what a malach in Hebrew means? An angel? It means a shliach.
Okay.
So the sun and the moon and the stars are all, the Rambam says they're Bali Deya, they have intelligence. But the bottom line is, when you see everything as a shliach, that is not an issue. Because then it's very clear. God sends a messenger to Avram or to any of us, when we say Shalom Aleichem Friday night. But that's a shliach. We learned about it in Ayin Beis, the role of angels. I was said before Shema, Birchas Yotzer, because they serve as what we learned, the cosmic digestive system. They're playing a role. So just like in our digestive system, someone will start worshiping your digestive system, that's a pretty big distortion. It's part of a bigger picture. So the mistake would be if someone, yes, begins to worship an angel, and actually in Catholicism, there is that idea where angels become, that is the whole problem. You start giving power to something failing to recognize that it's just a channel of a godly experience. So there's no problem saying that a bracha from Hashem comes through, let's say, the doctors that help a person heal. But to say the doctor is the healer, that's incorrect. God is the healer, but God allowed human beings. He gave them the powers, he gave them the knowledge, the information, the ability to discover how to help heal. So it's about context. That's what the Rambam really is saying. He's not knocking the stars. The problem is that all these things are simply just channels. They're not an end in themselves. That's the big, big thing. Money is a blessing. God blesses someone with money because you can do a lot of good things with money. But when you start worshiping money, that's where the problem begins. The worship only belongs to one place. The Talmud says, the wine belongs to the master, to the owner. But you say thank you to the waiter. Well, the waiter, yes, you respect him because he delivered it to you. But you're not going to say the waiter is the creator of the wine. You have to, everything is context. So when you say thank you to someone, I'm thanking you, my teacher, my mentor, my parent. You're thanking them for channeling and bringing God's blessings to you. That's the context in a healthy way. When you start worshiping the messenger or the instruments that brought you the message, that's where all the issues begin. People worship. We have idol worship today. You ever see how fans, sports fans, are passionate and obsessive about their teams? When we all know it's nonsense in the sense. It's entertainment, it's sportsmanship, it's athleticism. No one's taking away from the skills, but it definitely borders on type of worship. I'm not going to call it Avodah Zarah in the legal sense of the word because they're not calling it God. They're not worshiping it like that. But the obsession with objects, the objectification of things, the commercialization of things. I mean, we see money. Look at what money people will do for money. That's definitely like a golden calf. So we have plenty of examples of it today. It's just not maybe stones and wood and so on. I remember, funny, when I was a child, I remember the first time I heard about a diamond. I don't know, someone had said at a table that I just bought a diamond ring for my new bride, and they spent, I don't know what kind of money on it. So I remember I asked my mother, I said, what's a diamond? So she looked at me, she started laughing. She said, it's a stone. So I said, stones? There are a lot of stones out there. I could go in the garden, I'll bring you a bunch of stones. She says, no, it's a more rare stone. And it shines, it's, So I said, so why is it more valuable? She says, because it looks good. So I said, only the looks? She says, no, it's also rare. You don't have so many. And I couldn't wrap my head around why it would have any value. But then, of course, I came to understand. Same thing like gold is the standard currency of that behind. But why is gold? Why not Rice Krispies? Okay, that's man-made. But why not peanuts? The answer is because of the rarity, and humans mutually decided that gold would be a standard, whatever the reason is. But if gold was in abundance like dust, it would lose all its value. So Madanim Mitzim from Rambam says, when Mashiach comes, the lights will be plentiful like dust. Imagine gold being around like dust. All that we worshipped will suddenly have no meaning because everybody has it. So it's interesting how human beings value things. They had this heist, theft at the Louvre in Paris. So I was looking at the jewels that were stolen. They have pictures of the necklace and so on. I understand. I'm not minimizing, but you start thinking that it has replaced God in some ways. I have a theory of mine that because of I guess the corruption and the abuse and religion becoming so meaningless to so many people, I think the young generation has replaced religion very much with music being like a prayer, and a rock concert being like a prayer service, and a Grateful Dead concert being like a pilgrimage with incense and all other types of substances. I really believe that. And you see people dancing or singing, at a concert, you feel it has that fervent and passionate element that was once reserved for prayer, for those who knew how to pray and prayed with the true passion. So we have replaced things, but humans always need something to commit to worship. To be honest, who is it? I think Bob Dylan has a song called "We All Worship Something." How's the song go?
You're gonna have to serve. We're gonna have
Yeah,
to
we all
serve
serve.
somebody.
Yeah, everybody serves. Now the question is: are you serving humans, or human creations, or are we serving God, who's not human and is completely beyond? Mordechai refused to bow to Haman. Everyone bowed to Haman. It's like going to a company. Everybody bows to the CEO because you need him and you want his favors. But one man, Mordechai, decided to disrupt and make everyone uncomfortable. He will not bow to Haman. We don't bow to humans and we don't bow to human institutions. That was always what made the powers and the rulers of the world, including Nimrod in the time of Avram, furious. They could not stand the fact that these Jews refuse to respect what they would call respect and bow and worship them. And the answer is because there's only one God, and that's it. And God is not a human. God is a different reality. And connecting or worshiping God is the bittul. I'm getting out of my ego. I'm not looking for another ego to worship. That's the essence, if you want, of the whole picture.
I think, Rabbi, a comment and then a question. To quote yourself, we've discussed this a number of times over the years, that it's the neshama, the soul of the human being, desires to connect with something or some energy, some being, something. Meaning, it could be, ideally, it should be the Abish, it should be God and godliness, etc. But you just identified in the shmooze, whatever, for bringing half a dozen of maybe 2 dozen different things that people connect with instead. Their phones or music or face, rock stars, football stars, whatever. But you yourself have explained that these are illustrations or manifestations of the soul's yearning, desire to connect with something beyond it, beyond the self. That's something transcendent, and the error, the folly, the mistake, isn't connecting with anything that is beyond the self except for God. And so I think that perhaps there are some for whom these other targets or objective, I don't know, sources or these other things, these externalities, these things outside the self are in fact the be all end all, the all there is, and maybe they even consider the idea, the notion that there's some other form of spirituality, and they reject it. They say that's nonsense, and all I care about is going to Grateful Dead concerts. But I think for most people, having observed some of these people, and I agree with you what you said about music concerts, 100% agree with you. The Indians like this, they don't know any better. And the soul yearns to connect to something transcendent. So you see
Exactly
people,
right. It wasn't a critique of the people, just for the record. They are searching. Totally correct. Yeah.
so
Go
I
ahead.
think
Sorry.
the challenge is to make, um, I don't want to call it godliness or spirituality around one
I'll tell you
God.
exactly what it is. It's to harness that desire and that longing
Right.
toward the right objectives. Exactly,
Correct.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I was just for clarity. I know you know that, but sometimes it can come across
No,
without
no,
saying.
I'm glad you said it, and
uh,
it's a correct qualification, an important one. Yeah, I
because
totally
I
agree.
see a lot of lost souls or souls
Oh,
that
there's no
are.
question. I'll take it a step further. When I deal with people who have addictions, serious addictions, drug, sex addictions, alcohol, gambling, I always say to myself and sometimes to them, mediocre people or complacent people don't become addicts. It's passionate people that become. And it's like when you're very thirsty or hungry, you're going to grab whatever drink comes your way, even if it's toxic, because you're so desperate. So it's coming from a very deep passion that's unfortunately been misdirected. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea, psychology, attachment disorder. We all need attachment. If you don't get healthy attachments with your parents, with other loved ones, you're going to look for attachments in places that can be very destructive. But the need for attachment is very spiritual and very soulful and very godly for that matter. So it's actually, that's why it's so dangerous, because you're replacing God with something else. And the approach is not to be critical. The approach is to help someone and say, music that you love, that music is part of God's language. Now find out who gave us that music.
Correct.
So,
but I think the reason why we don't really say there are that many worshippers of idols or stars of Avodah Zarah is because, number one, that particular type of Avodah Zarah, worshiping the stars or chveis, whatever they did, other things that are even more disgusting, doesn't really exist today. But beyond that, it's the notion of a complete and absolute rejection of God and saying, there may be a God, nice God of the Jews, but I, for whatever reason, reject that completely, and I'd rather worship a pile of something else.
Look, yeah.
But anyways, the question.
I'll just say this. Let me just throw this in as well before you ask. Look at science. Science replaced religion during the Enlightenment, or they wanted it to replace religion, because religion was seen as archaic or primitive or irrational. But science, no question, for many, even till this day, people worship the mind and science as once upon a time people may have worshipped religion.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it.
When the truth is, they need to complement each other. It's not a matter of either or.
For sure.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, my question is, it's not even really, it's relevant to the Parsha and the Vort you gave over, not so much to what we just discussed. The question's like this. You did mention Avram Avinu's search for meaning, if you will, frankly, search for and ultimately finding meaning in God, the only meaning, only true meaning. But you did mention the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, and it kind of jolted me for a second. I said, yeah, wait a second, that's true. And there was monotheism being taught in that yeshiva, and yet Avram Avinu sort of gets credit as being the father of monotheism. How do we reconcile those two?
So first of all, Avram was a grandson of Shem, just for the record. So he definitely, remember, there were human beings. I don't know how many people lived on the planet then, but there were enlightened people. There were people who were thinking before Avram. He's not like the only one that thought about these ideas, but he's the one that turned it into a system. He turned it into a family. Yeshiva Shem Ve'aver, we don't know much about. Was it 5 people? Was it 2 people? Was it 100 people? Not necessarily. It could have been a few, like enlightened sages. Go today, go find, if you went on a journey, right, and you had no access to Jews or synagogues, you're just going on a journey. It's like a needle in a haystack to go find those few individuals that you can trust, that will really give you a true. So Shem Ve'aver was like I would say almost like a secret little
society.
Society. It could have been a society of one, for all we know.
I see.
But at least 1 or 2 that remained, that they passed on what they had learned. Look, even Noach, the fact that God said all human beings were all perished in the flood. It was only Noach and his family. Because Noach was a ish tzaddik. He retained some of the goodness and some of the tradition that he received from those before him. And then he passed it on to his son Shem. His other 2 sons, not so much. And so there was a trickle, you can say. But it didn't become a movement. It didn't become a family, a community. So no one says that there was no such idea of God. Listen, Adam and Chava knew about God, and I'm sure their children knew about it. And even in the time of the Mabul, they probably knew. But you know what? They got so corrupt. It was a lost situation. Avram reignited that spirit but we don't know a lot about Shem ve'Ever. We just know that there was, I would say, he may have had access to someone, whether it was his grandfather or great-grandfather. We know he met Melchizedek, and Melchizedek is Shem in this week's chapter. So Shem was still alive. But again, the details, I would have to look up in the Midrashim. I spoke about it a little last night on My Life, Chassidic Supply, about Melchizedek. So that's the answer. And then Avram, of course, turns it into
I see.
a true movement that changed the world.
Yaakov was also in yeshiva with Ava for 14 years on the way to getting married Rachel.
Yeah, that's correct. And there's
And
no question the fact that Avram tells, and later Yaakov tells, Yitzchak tells Yaakov to marry someone from the family of Avram means there was something in Avram's locale where he grew up that clearly was a little more refined. That's why they insisted to marry from Haran, from that area, even though it was Lavan and Psuel, who weren't exactly righteous individuals. But there was something, I guess, there was like a, you see that today as well, certain strands, what's not the word strands, what's the word I want to use?
Strata?
Strata.
Not strata.
Levels of society?
I would think I was using a word like certain streaks, certain
Streams.
I forget the right exact word. For certain
Clusters?
Doesn't matter. The word will come to me. The point is that there was something in the air by some individuals, but again, there was formalizing it, and it says Avram Megayer es Anoshim, Sarah Megayer es Anoshim. So clearly, they turned it into a true movement, which was a whole other reality. And Avram paid the price. He was a threat, and he was thrown into the oven, etc., into the
Lions.
fires, and survived. And he paid the 10 nisyanos. I wanted to just add one more thing, maybe related, maybe not. Now, yesterday there was an election in Argentina for the Congress. And everyone predicted that it would not go very well for President Milei, because he needed a certain majority there to be able to implement his changes.
Economic reform plan. Yeah.
And he won the majority, the 41%. And I've been in touch with I was in touch with a few people in Argentina last night and today, and literally they're calling it a miracle from God. I heard it from a few people who I would never believe. They say absolute miracle. I said, "You sure there's no?" Because he has his challenges there, and they said a few people told me they said it's because his faith in God that God gave it to him.
I believe it's true. Yeah, I mean the voters had to vote, but a lot.
Anyway, and he won by a large number. So
very convincing.
I sent you an article this morning, but you knew about it before I sent it to you.
Yeah. I followed it. He happens to be my friend as well. So
I figured, yeah.
So, and I know how important it is, because if he's successful, trust me, it's good for Jews and good for Israel and good for the world.
No doubt.
Because the man is a truly believer, and very healthy believer. I mean, I really think God God chooses his leaders, and in this crazy world, to have a man like him is a big, big blessing.
What I find miraculous.
Now, trust me, I'm not worshiping him. He's not Avodah Zarah. He's not perfect, but he's an agent. I think a real agent of Hashem.
What I find miraculous is that it was a popular vote. Citizens voted, and so it's kind of hard to say. Obviously, Ruach HaKodesh, God works through everything, but what's interesting to me is that they know that he's a Philo-Semite. He's Philo-Semite. He loves Jews. He embraces Judaism. He's not a Jew, but
and remember. And Argentina was a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. And they voted for him anyway. So it says they respect his respect of the Jews and the Jews' God. To me, that's the miracle. Those people that harbored Nazis, 75 years ago, and continuing, there's still Nazis there. The majority that were, at least the important part of the public, does not disdain this man, despite his very public embracement.
I remember when he went to Israel the first time I was with him, and by the Kotel, it was Rosh Chodesh Adar, not this time with the war with Iran, last year. And I told him it's Rosh Chodesh Adar, Mishenichnes Adar Marben Besimcha. We start Simcha, and Adar, he started dancing. So as people told him that he should tone it down because there are cameras, videos, and it's not going to look good. He's a president of a country in Argentina. He's dancing at the Kotel. And he refused. He just was dancing away. He didn't care. He grabbed me. We were dancing together. And I saw, like, you could say, listen, you're a president. There's a presidential behavior, demeanor, etc. But he had a certain purity. And you're right. The country is, because you think, Argentina is not exactly a Jewish country or pro-Jewish country. And yet he didn't care. And it's not affecting him in that sense. His issues are going to be more economic with the people, clearly. If they have issues with him is because corruption of 80 years has created a lot of problems, not so simple to correct without some pain. So that's the question. Can he get through? Can the people give him the time to get through the painful period till he can balance out whatever he has to balance there?
It didn't hurt
even
that Trump put $12 billion out there for him, too.
20 billion. 20 billion.
Okay.
And now it's going to be 40 because they're also bringing in the bank. Yeah, they're going to be 40 billion this year.
But there's another aspect to this that I think is really amazing, and that, that Iran was behind that terrible tragedy, the blowing up of the Jewish center. Right. And that for so many years there were prosecutors who were killed, people who, it's just amazing that this is a complete turnaround to have him,
And imagine, and it happened, he was elected September 23. No, not September, November 23. Literally a month after October 7th. I mean, is that not divine intervention? Absolutely.
The whole thing is just so incredible, I gotta say.
No, I think in my lifetime, but Derech HaTeva is the first time I see the possibility, not through miracle, through a world leader, that we can really, it's a game changer in the context of morality and Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, and bringing a whole consciousness of God into this world.
Totally.
Listen.
Oh, sorry.
Well, now it's going to be a lot easier. The more he's successful with the economics and the politics, the more he can really have.
They'll shut up the media. But whoever thought that Trump would be going around thanking God, every place he goes? It's crazy.
Yeah. And look at Netanyahu, how much God he's suddenly talking about.
The best miracle that I see in Argentina is that he actually connects to opposite thing: economy, materialism, with ethic, with moral, with knowing how to deal in a trustworthy manner. And from this point of view, he himself did this miracle. And God just followed his miracle. And he made the biggest miracle. I'm glad that he won these elections. I see it as another sign, another spark for us to see Mashiach is coming.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
How do we get the same miracle that happened voting in Argentina in the mayoral race in New York City, which can be crazy?
That's a good contrast. Very good contrast. By becoming connected to God. I mean, Milay's strength is clearly, he goes to the Ohel on his own without any drama. He has a certain fundamental connection. We just talked about the whole Avraham Avinu story. Are we going to choose self-worship, which is essentially Marxism and communism, or are we going to choose the divine, the God? I don't know. New York, listen, maybe New York is getting what it deserves. How about that?
Could be a big wake-up call just for the whole, for the U.S.
I said it in one of my talks. I remember the pogrom in 1991 in Crown Heights when Yankel Rosenbaum was killed. was under the watch of Mayor Dinkins. Dinkins called off the police. He said, let them vent, and end up killing an innocent Jew. And as a result, it hit rock bottom, and Giuliani came in. And then, I don't know what happened to Giuliani later, but then he saved New York. You remember, all of us remember. You remember, Robin? He saved New York, literally, financially.
Totally.
The police, the crime went down. The years of Giuliani, those years that he was mayor. But I don't know if it would have happened had Dinkins not screwed up so much. So I look at this. Mamdani wins. I hope he does, but he wins. He'll destroy New York in several ways. And then there'll be the wake-up call, and hopefully there'll be the boomerang effect. Also, I don't, what can I tell you? I don't know.
We
Maybe
used to say,
God is showing us the two contrasts, the extreme left, and here you have Milei in Argentina, and look, a guy like Charlie Kirk, murdered, etc. There are signs out there of what's going on. It's paganism versus God. There's no question about it. It just has a different form today. I mean, the extreme left is definitely idol worship. There's no question about it.
But it's an unholy alliance between the extreme left and the extreme.
Okay, so we could sit and wring our hands. We could sit and wring our hands and just complain, or we have to do something. I mean, my view is our job is to spread the good word, the positive. We have to be Avram Avinu. And Avram will prevail over Nimrod and all those forces. That's the story of history. He was one against many, and he prevailed. Today, Avram's values are cherished. No one remembers what Nimrod and his cohorts taught. So I think we have to be that Avram Avinu and Sarah, and just keep hammering away. Milei loves Avram, loves Moshe Rabbeinu, loves the Rebbe. So he's a force, and hopefully we can get this to as many people as possible. That's, to me, the only real solution. The only way you fight idolatry is by bringing God and light and love and healthy spirituality into the picture.
Whenever we have the CM, maybe we can invite President Milei. I'm sure he'd be honored to speak for you.
That would be amazing. We could have like a real, I think this conference.
Well, that would be a game changer. That would bring Chassidus to.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
That's why I think we should do it.
I think we should think big.
I think he'll come. I really think he'll come. He can make a visit to the UN, the whole business.
Okay.
I think it will help people in New York to see where is the true core reason. The people deserve their governor. People of New York has to change in order to get their true governor. Maybe Argentina is an illustration of the exact opposite. I remember when Thatcher was elected, I saw what kind of people were England. British at that time was completely different at this time. In comparison with this time, people of England was exactly deserved Thatcher at that time. And now what they have, they deserve it. So is New York.
Yeah, when Trump was elected, I was invited to speak somewhere. It was a very anti-Trump crowd. So I decided to quote, it says in the Gemara, Medrash, Parnas Lefi Hadar. It means every generation gets the leader it deserves. So I said that. The people didn't like it at all. I said, maybe did you ever think that? Maybe you got the leader you deserved. Instead of the leader that you idealize, maybe you got a leader that's like you. He likes football, he likes women, he likes all kinds of stuff, he likes money. Anyway, people didn't like that, but I think that was true.
I think sorry. I was just going to say one thing. Remember when we did the what does a Chassidic rabbi have to say to a modern audience? Why don't we,
Yeah.
Peter,
With Peter Himmelman. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
he's been very vocal on Facebook. You know, I think we should I think we should really do this up. Maybe we could get him to come and bring him some other
So
musicians.
Yitzchak is still there. Yitzchak, let's schedule a call,
Yes.
like a committee call, and let's get it going.
All right.
I don't want to put more pressure on you than you have, but you know.
No, for sure. I will solicit the group. I'll do one of those surveys, like who can be maximizing the number of people for a particular date. Of course, I'm going to run the dates I'll run the dates by you first, so that whatever times we put out there.
I'll accommodate unless I literally have something. I'll accommodate what
Okay.
works.
All right. So whoever's still on the call, get ready for a doodle. What I think they call the doodle surveys, or WhatsApp does it too. We could just take a poll. What day, time is best for people who
Right.
want to be on the committee or participate?
And
then
listen, if someone can't make it, they could always see the minutes, and then
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. You're not traveling in the next week or two, are you?
I am. I'm traveling next Wednesday for the weekend in California. I have to go to a wedding, but it
Okay.
doesn't matter. I can meet even wherever I am. It's not. It's a
Okay.
Zoom.
Oh, okay. All right. Just want to see.
Don't worry
Okay.
about me. Let whatever the people come up with, I'll fit in. I'll work it in.
Okay. All right. Clean that, or I'll get something going out the next day or so. I'm in Miami now, traveling back to California, so it may not be till tomorrow, but believe that or I'll get it done.
Okay, let me end the recording here, which I did not. Let me